Good to see you again. So, just as a continuation from last week. So, what we were doing last week, we were taking our information from this book, Leadership for an Age of High Consciousness 2 by Bhuta Bhavana. Last week, we went through the first 5 of 10 principles of leadership. And these principles are actually derived from, and this is really important, they're derived from the understanding in terms of the conversation between Bhishmadev and Yudhisthira. There's also a second section in the book, which is the teachings of Prithu Maharaj. And what we explained is that the way we're structuring this, and this is really important, is that we begin by giving you the 10 overarching principles of leadership. Then from there, we go into more of a deep dive. And the reason why we did this is because, and I've been studying this, the structure of learning. What tends to happen in many of our communities and so on is, to be very honest, the way that we teach, it, in some way, it tends to have some element of, I don't want to say, it tends to have some element of being disorganized. What do I mean by disorganized? You see, when you teach people something, if you teach it as a series of details, it actually has an overwhelming effect on the mind. In the secular world, they call this cognitive load, that you feel that you're overwhelmed with lots of details, lots of points, lots of pieces of information. For example, in the internet right now, or on the internet right now, whenever you do a search, you will find literally thousands, if not millions or billions sometimes, of web pages on a particular topic. So people may often feel there's so much here, I don't know where to begin. And it's not necessarily that the first 1 or 2 links are actually the best material, okay? It could just be that people have paid money to be at the top of the list. It could be that they're the most popular sites. It has nothing necessarily to do with quality. But one of the most powerful things that we see in the way that Prabhupada has taught us is he actually, if you look at the structure of his teaching, the structure of his writing, and the structure of his classes, what he actually did is he began with the conclusion, right? So technically, the conclusion of all the Shastra is called Siddhanta. So even if someone has not read all of Prabhupada's books, they've not listened to many classes, even in the first few days or weeks of their Krishna consciousness, they understand the key conclusions, right? So key conclusion number 1, Krishna is a supreme personality of Godhead. Key conclusion number 2, everyone is his servant, right? Part and parcel of Krishna. Key conclusion number 3, we're not the body, right? Linked to being the servant, we're not the body. Key conclusion number 4, the prime means by realizing all of this is to chant the holy names of Krishna. Right? Key conclusion number 5, the material world is not our home and we can't be happy here. So in the beginning stages of Krishna consciousness, all the conclusions of the Shastra are actually given. And then when we read through everything and anything else, what we're literally doing is we're getting supporting arguments in pursuance of the conclusion that we've already been given. And that's actually a superior way of education. The reason why it's superior is because that way of education actually mirrors the way that the mind and the intelligence works. According to neuroscience, right? What happens is you have a certain key concept and then the neural pathways, they organize around that. They connect that key point with so many other points. And that's why, for example, one of the most famous memory and learning techniques was given by a person named Tony Buzan. And he talks about mind mapping. And the reason why his technique was popular is because, again, it mirrored the way that the mind was working, in the sense that the mind will have a central concept, and then it will have different points which link to the central concept. So think of Siddhanta, or the conclusions of the Shastra, as a central concept, and then all the other information that we read and hear, it's meant to organize around those conclusions. Okay, So in the same way, we're reflecting that in the way that we're approaching this subject. So last session, we gave you the first 5 of the 10 principles of leadership. Today, we're going to give you the next 5. And then as we go through, what I'm going to ask you to do is, as you hear different things, you'll be able to see, oh, that point relates to this particular principle. Okay. Now, when we learn in this way, something very powerful happens. Everything starts to reinforce the primary understanding. And because it reinforces the primary understanding, it increases very strongly, it increases the chances that we will both learn the primary points and that we will act on them. Okay. I think we've mentioned in many sessions that we're not so much concerned about philosophy, we're more concerned with transformation. We want to learn the philosophy in such a way that it transforms us. Okay, and it's very, very important. I was discussing with one devotee this morning. They shared a very wonderful point that was made by Satchidananda Maharaj. He was explaining that devotees go through 3 stages in their Krishna consciousness. In the first stage of our Krishna consciousness, they may have tremendous enthusiasm, but along with our tremendous enthusiasm, because we've just come out of the material energy or, non-devotional activities, but so the enthusiasm is there, but it's also based upon the idea that we can become Krishna conscious by our own strength. So that's the first stage often in a devotee's life. Now, in the second stage, what tends to happen is, as we have more realization that we are not the controller, but we realize it in the sense that we can't control other people's behavior and activity, we then can become critical of others. They're not doing what I want them to do. Why do they behave this way? Why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? So that's the second stage. So along with the realization that I'm not the controller because I can't control everyone else, I then become a bit critical of other people's tendencies. That's the second stage. The third stage is where I come to the realization that I can only make advancement in Krishna consciousness by the mercy of Guru, the devotees, and ultimately Krishna. At that third stage is more characterized by a mood of surrender. You see, I understand that my progress is actually coming from being the receiver of the mercy and what I've done and what the devotee is meant to do, what we're meant to do. Well, maybe we'll do a seminar on surrender later on. What we're meant to do is position ourselves to receive mercy, knowing that the mercy we receive is literally the fuel. I repeat this point. The mercy that we receive is literally the fuel that allows us to progress. So these 3 stages are often experienced in the life of a devotee. Stage 1, over-enthusiastic, but based upon the idea that I can be Krishna conscious by my own strength. Stage 2, recognizing that I can't do it, so therefore I lose some enthusiasm, but I tend to now deflect that lack of enthusiasm towards blaming other people because they don't behave the way that they should, and that's why I'm not Krishna conscious. I become more critical. And then the third stage, the enthusiasm can go back up again, okay? But now the enthusiasm is going back up again, realizing that I'm trying to be the receiver. I've accepted, I've integrated this idea that I can't control. I'm not the controller. What other people think about me, say about me, do, it's not within my power to completely orchestrate that. Although I have an obligation to do my duty where necessary, but I'm not fully in control of that. However, what I can do is continue to position myself. So the endeavor is at that point becomes for the mercy. Beginning stage, the endeavor is to be Krishna conscious directly because I think I can do it by myself. Second stage, endeavor goes down as I realize that I can't control, right? Endeavor goes down. And because I'm critical of devotees, mercy goes down, second stage. Third stage, endeavor goes back up, but now it's an endeavor to be surrendered. It's an endeavor to position myself to receive. And in that stage, which is why our acharyas write about this. In that stage, I know that my advancement has nothing to do with me ultimately, beyond my trying to receive something. I know that my advancement is because I was a recipient, and any credit that I have is that I just put myself in a position to receive something coming from someone else. And we see this. What does Prabhupada say? He says, my only credit is that I did not deviate from the order of my spiritual master. What does that mean? It means the spiritual master is pouring down grace in the form of an instruction. And it means that Prabhupada, he stood underneath that cascade of mercy, right? Like a waterfall. The waterfall's coming down, you stand under the waterfall, then you get wet. All right, the water cascades upon you. You go away from the waterfall, you stay dry. So the waterfall is the instruction of Guru. That's where all the mercy is descending. You stay in line with the mercy by following the instruction, you get wet. That means you become absorbed in their grace. We go away from the instruction, then it doesn't matter actually how hard we try, how much work we do. No, that's not what Guru Maharaj said. That wasn't the instruction of Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. We go away from that, then suddenly, oh, hold on, how come I'm not wet anymore? How come I'm so dry? Okay, so we want to encourage. This is so important in a devotee's life. If we don't understand these points, at one point we may even start to turn around and think, you know, this Krishna consciousness doesn't work. Right? I've been practicing for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and I don't seem to be getting this outcome. It's available, but we get it to the extent that we are following as we have been told to follow according to the instructions of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. These are very, very key things to understand. Okay, anyway, with that, let's get to the next 5 of the points around empowered leadership. What I'm going to do first of all is just list the first 5 that we covered last week. Number 1, a leader loves people and are sensitive to their emotions and needs. Number 2, they help people to feel happy and secure. Number 3, they create lasting value at all times. Number 4, they are philosophers. They seek to convey ultimate abiding truth. And number 5, they lead from the inside out, knowing that character is power. So let's go to number 6. Number 6 is that the leader is principle-centered. I've been having an incredibly exciting experience in the study of Prabhupada's books. What I've been trying to do when I'm studying Prabhupada's books is try to see what is a principle, right? What is a principle? A principle is a universal law, okay? When we read Prabhupada's books and we start to notice, oh, this is a principle, then what it allows us to do is it allows us to understand how that same point can be applied across many different times, places, and circumstances. So when we talk about Dharma, Dharma also means universal law, the Dharma of something, right? So when we understand the universal law and we're able to live by that principle, you automatically guarantee that your life will be much more successful. The reason why we have so much chaos in the modern world is because the majority of leaders in the world, although they seem very sophisticated, they don't know what they're doing. They don't understand what is a universal law. They don't understand the principles of Dharma. Therefore, knowingly and often unknowingly, they break the law, which causes negative repercussions in their own life and negative repercussions in the life of the people that they're leading. Of course, there's a connection because the karma of the population is such that they are allowed to have a certain leader based upon the population's karma. So unfortunately, no one is innocent. Okay, so let's just dive into this a little bit more. So you'll see, and Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj mentions this in the book, you'll see, especially with American presidents, that in many cases when a US president leaves office, when they step down as president, at a certain point, they tend to have many issues with their health. or legal issues, or various kinds of issues will come up. Why? It's often due to the fact that they are gaining the karmic repercussions of the policies that they either put in place or that they allowed when they were in the position of leader. You see? So none of these positions are neutral. The leader takes a certain percentage of the collective karma of the population that he or she is leading. You see? If people knew this point, then you would see that people would be very reluctant to want to just be in control. And I'm not sure if we mentioned this last time, but actually, I don't think we mentioned this last time. The biggest problem we have with leadership in the modern world is we've disconnected the connected. What do I mean by that? Now, people think that leadership just means power. In the ancient Vedic teachings, it's never spoken of like that. When people are hearing about leadership and power and influence in exactly the same conversation, the same book, the same chapter, the same discussion, the same reading, it's always explained to them in connection with responsibility, right? Power is always discussed in connection with responsibility because that's the law. That's the natural order of things. There is no power without responsibility. Where are the examples that we hear about? And many of you will have heard this in Krishna conscious classes. It says one should not become a father. One should, so a parent, a teacher, a king, if they are not a guru, if they are unable to deliver their dependence, right? Many of us have heard that particular point in our classes in the Shastra. It's emphasizing that they are two sides of the same coin. If you have power, you also have responsibility. And if you do not do what you're meant to do, you're held more responsible than the other, than in another situation. So this breaking of principle is a fundamental issue in the modern society. Either we're in ignorance, we don't know the principles, or we're in passion, we go against the principles. We think they don't apply to us, and then it leads to all kinds of issues in an individual's life. So when I was going through the Shastra, there's so many examples of this. I'll give you one. So in the third canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 29, text number 17, in the purport, Prabhupada talks about this idea of swajati. Swajati means like-minded, okay? Now there's a lot to this, a lot more than people realize. So in that purport, so Prabhupada talks about swajati, and one of the things he says in the purport is that one should associate with devotees. So swajati, meaning like-minded, is a principle. It can apply to different situations and it will mean different things. So let's go through this. First of all, if I apply this idea of like-minded to the general population, right, the global population, then in a world where some people are practicing Krishna consciousness and some people are not practicing Krishna consciousness, then this idea of like-minded within that context means that I should associate with devotees, because between devotees and non-devotees, like-minded in that sense means to associate with people who are also into Krishna consciousness. So that's one meaning of like-minded in that context. Now, let's go to another context. In that same purport, Prabhupada says in brackets, swajati, of the same caste, okay? So what does this imply? If I'm thinking about like-minded in terms of varnashram, okay, where we have some people who have the mentality of laborers, some people have the mentality of business people, some people have the mentality of kshatriyas, some people have the mentality of intellectuals, then in that context, like-minded will be people who have the same nature as you. Okay, so if you're looking at like-minded within the context of varnashram. And then I was speaking to one friend of mine, one devotee, and he told me, he said something very interesting. He said his spiritual master had said that like-minded, right, swajati specifically, it means the same rasa. And I thought, brilliant. When you're looking at it in the highest platform, on the transcendental platform, the word, that same concept, like-minded, because it's a principle, that on the transcendental platform, Like-minded means of the same rasa. So in Krishna's pastimes, the cowherd boys, they associate with each other, right? The gopis, they associate with each other, right? Those in parental rasa, they all associate with each other. Krishna, he has his own servants, right? So dasya rasa, right? When Krishna, after Krishna comes back in the morning from milking the cows, he's bathed and dressed by his servants. And then he'll take breakfast, and he'll take breakfast with the cowherd boys, you know? So those servants who bathe and dress him, that's dasya rasa, you know? So it's again the same principle, but it has its application in different contexts, in different ways. Anyway, it's just a very interesting way of reading the scripture, where you start to see much more. Oh, I get it. This is a principle, so it can apply like this in this situation. It can apply like this in this situation. It can apply like this in this situation. So going back to this idea that the leader is principle centered, it means you can trust the leader, actually, because principle means impartiality. Let's think this through. If you are just and you're fair by principle, okay, by principle you're fair, then it means that even you're in a position of leadership and someone in the group is your friend, right? Someone in the team is your friend, but you're in charge of the team, and your friend does something that's unfair, okay? They're in the team, they do something unfair to someone else in the team, but they're your friend. But because you're principle centered, everyone else in the team know that they can expect you to still deal fairly. They can expect you to tell the person who is your friend that, you know what, we are friends, but I have to say, you were wrong to treat that person that particular way, right? It actually builds security, because what it says is that even though we are naturally, by nature, all of us, we are personal, so we will have friendships. We will reciprocate with people differently based upon our closeness, our relationship. That's natural. You can't get around that. You can't get around that. However, because an individual is also principle-centered, they're going to still treat people the right way, because they're going to judge every situation against eternal, fixed, and fair principles, as opposed to, you're my friend, you were actually rude to this person, but because you're my friend, I'm not going to say anything, even though it's my responsibility to pull you up on that. Someone else isn't my friend, they're being mistreated, therefore I'm just going to allow them to be mistreated because I don't like them anyway, even though they are within the circle of my responsibility. I was speaking to someone the other day, and we were talking about how a particular person that we know is not protective. Manu says a king who does not protect his citizens is a dead king, because the underlying principle of leadership is actually protection. You see, the dharma of leadership is actually protection. That's why that's why Manu emphasizes that point. The leader, the king who does not protect his citizens is a dead king. But Manu expands on that. But Manu, the import to that statement is much deeper than people realize, because protection, it does not just mean like with a sword. When a king in the Vedic age protected people, it means protection which is physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. It covered all 4 dimensions of life from the king, because the king was meant to be a Raj Rishi. They're a great Kshatriya, so Raj, and they're also a great Rishi, a great sage. So physical protection means that the king was meant to make sure that all the resources which were necessary for their citizens were being made available. You will see in the Bhagavatam, there are pastimes where Prithu Maharaj, when the earth was withholding its resources, right? Prithu Maharaj was threatening to kill the earth planet, Mother Bhumi, and actually, and said, like, look, you're withholding resources from the citizens, which is sinful. you better start providing the resources or else. You see? So physical resource, that's one level. Second, actually mental. So mental has a very interesting function. It's providing people proper knowledge, proper understanding, right? The proper understanding of Dharma. Now, what that implies also is protection of the Brahmanas. Because if you kill or you minimize the intellectual class, and by Brahmins, I mean real Brahmanas, those who are actually learned in the Shastra and who live according to that too. If you protect those, then they will continue to disseminate the truth. You see, the proper understanding. So that's mental, intellectual. That mental also has to do with engaging people according to their psychophysical nature in the society. That's the other side of it as well. So that protection, that's Varnashram, making sure that the society is organized by Varnashram. So physical, mental / intellectual. Then the other one is emotional. This is very interesting. The king would have such a bond of love with their citizens. We see this in both the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. And we see this, I mean, it's so touching. If you watch Memories of Prabhupada, remembering Prabhupada, you'll see again and again and again, it's such a powerful point. Prabhupada's disciples, they really love Prabhupada. They really love Prabhupada. And why did they love him? It's because Prabhupada, because he was saturated with divine love, due to him being truly Krishna conscious, he loved his disciples. And it was palpable. They could feel that he loves me. You know, Prabhupada, he would sometimes chastise his disciples. There's it's in the chapter in the Krishna book where Indra has to apologize to Krishna because Indra tried to kill the residents of Vrindavan, right? Sending the rains coming down, the thunderstorms and so on. You know, the whole pastime of Govardhan Puja. Now Krishna protects the residents of Vrindavan from the rains of Indra. Indra has to apologize. And in that chapter, Prabhupada says that only the father who has love for the son should chastise the son. It's a very powerful point. And it's often forgotten that if there has to be correction, ideally, there are some exceptions where there's an emergency, but ideally, the correction should come from a loving source. You see? And actually, ideally, the love should come first before the correction. Because the love establishes a relationship. And then when the correction comes later on, the correction is also, it is also perceived or more likely to be perceived, according to the qualification of the disciple, the correction is then more likely to be perceived as another expression of the same love. So Prabhupada disciples, when you watch Memories of Prabhupada, they will often talk about how much love Prabhupada had for them. Prabhupada, he made a statement about Malati, Mother Malati. He said, sometimes I chastise her. He said, but I would slit my throat for her. Prabhupada said that. I would slit my own throat for her, and he said, and she would slit her own throat for me. It's a very deep thing. It's a very, very deep thing. So this emotional support in a position of leadership is crucial. How does it translate? It translates in terms of building relationship with the people that we're leading. It translates in terms of noticing what they are doing and expressing appreciation for the endeavor, for the hard work, for the sacrifices that the team are making. You see? Sarve Sukhino Bhavantu. Prabhupada would often quote this point. And what he would actually explain is that it's basically making the statement that let everyone be happy. Huh? And that reflects also what Krishna himself says. Right? Susukam, Kartamavyayam, that this devotional service is shushukam, joyfully performed. It is a matter of the heart. right? So this emotional protection actually means relationship, building genuine appreciation, affectionate relationship. There's this verse, and it talks about, I'm going to ask if it's gone Redbridge, if you can find this particular verse. If you put in snigdha and you put in swajatiya, there's a famous verse which relates to this. I think it's from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Actually, I'm going to see if I can find this verse as well, because I received this verse, and from a devotee friend of mine, it was we were looking at it the other day. It may be 228 of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Yes, that's it. Yeah. Atasa jatiyasya snigdha bhagavat bhakta sango yata pramate. This is Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. I think it's actually and there's two verses. There's two verses. 228 and 1813. Okay, let's just see. I want to read you this particular verse. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 228. Actually, if you could look this up, 228, and just put it into the chat window, the translation, because it gives a formula which also relates to how we are meant to associate as devotees. Okay, so Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 228. So first canto, chapter 2, text 228, and 1813. First canto, chapter 18, text number 13, from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And if you could put that into the chat window, please, because I think it'll be good for everyone to see that. And then I'm going to actually just touch upon that, because it's actually very, very, very important. I'll just wait a second. If this comes up. Maybe we'll come back to that. I'll make the general point, and when we have the verse, we can look at it as well. The general point is that there's a formula for association, and this formula is often overlooked at our own peril, to be honest with you. So not only does it talk about like-minded, which we've touched upon, it also talks about affectionate. Snigdha means affection. So we often think, okay, we are associating with devotees. Yes, and we should have love and appreciation and respect for all the devotees. But at the same time, those that we bring more closely within our hearts, those we build a deeper relationship with, then we're looking for these points. In this third canto, chapter 29, text number 17, in that particular point, one of the things that Prabhupada says in the purport, which I think is very, very interesting, he talks about, and you can see this in the chat window, he talks about this making friendship with persons of the same standard. And in that same purport, he actually gives a few additional clues. He says mutual interests and understanding, which is very, very interesting, and as a marker for friendship as well. Mutual interests and understanding. But the snigdha, which we're getting to, is the affection. So the king, the leader, he also, or let's say the leader, they also build that bond through affection. And then, of course, the last dimension is a spiritual. The leader's main way of command is by example. Right? We're talking about this idea of principle. We're talking about how protection is a principle, and protection looks different in terms of physical, how it looks different in terms of mental, intellectual, how it looks different in terms of emotional, and of course, spiritual. Spiritual, it means spiritual practice. It means Krishna consciousness. It means doing things for Krishna's pleasure. It also means being an example. Yeah. So if I'm trying to be Krishna conscious, then my life is also communicating something, and it's protective. Why is it protective? It's protective because people then see that I'm trying to be Krishna conscious and the benefit that I'm deriving. And that can add to the inspiration of other people to be Krishna conscious, in order to also start to experience that same benefit in their own life. My wife and I, we did an exercise this morning. And I can't remember how long it took, but it was a very blissful exercise. What we were doing, so she was talking about a class that she'd heard by her guru, Satchidananda Maharaj. And he was making the point in the class that when Krishna, and I speak about this a lot because I found it to be so enriching. It's such a transformative practice. So Satchidananda Maharaj was talking about how when Krishna closes one door, he opens 3 doors. And he said that in our lives, we're really trying to understand Krishna's communication to us. He said the problem is that for many of us as devotees, we don't want to pay attention. We don't want to hear, or we try to ignore what Krishna's trying to show us. Of course, he also said that when Krishna's trying to show us something, often the message will come again and again. And he said at the same time also, we should always check that with our authorities, like that, you know? And that's also mentioned by Prabhupada in the first canto, chapter 19, text number 12 in the purple, about how every decision should be confirmed by some authority, every important decision. Anyway, so that's an aside. But the point is, he said that we often don't want to listen or don't try to tune into what Krishna is trying to teach us. And last night after Harinam, I was speaking to one very good friend of mine, and it was so enlivening because we'd had previous conversations. And this friend of mine, what continues to happen in the life of this friend of mine is he's constantly put in positions of people who try to push him around. And we'd already noticed that what kept happening is Krishna wants him to stand up for himself. He wants him to be assertive, not aggressive and not overly submissive. See, this is a model, by the way. Aggressive, mode of passion. Overly submissive, mode of ignorance. The mode of goodness version of those qualities is assertive. So he was telling me after Harinam yesterday that, so what had happened was a member of his family who's meant to take care of a certain responsibility has neglected it. And now they're close to that responsibility and it's their responsibility. And now they want him to do it, and he keeps getting put into a situation where if he doesn't become balanced and assertive, then the situation becomes worse, because Krishna is trying to teach him, I want you to be assertive. It's not that because you're Krishna conscious that you should somehow be some kind of material doormat for other people, And he keeps getting put into these kind of situations again and again and again until he stands firm in the right way, in the mode of goodness way, right? So it's not passion, it's not ignorance, it's goodness. What's the mode of goodness version? So you're not going to start shouting at people and being rude, no. But you're not going to be a pushover either. You're going to be balanced. And so he's now in a situation where he has to go and say to that person, well, you had this we both divvied up the responsibilities, and now at the last minute you're asking me to do it. Why haven't you done it? What's happened? Why haven't you taken care of these responsibilities, which are actually meant to be done by you? You see? And what we discussed, and it was so interesting, was and we've both seen this in our lives. And he was telling me about how he'd been told this by a certain person, and I said to him, I had the same thing. He said, and many of you may relate to this, when you're doing what you're meant to be doing, you actually feel peaceful in the heart. You actually feel, oh yeah, you feel there's a certain contentment that comes internally, because I was like, oh yeah, actually that was the right thing to do. I meant to do this. I meant to say this. I meant to relate in this way. And the opposite is also true. When we don't listen to Krishna's messages, when we don't do what we're meant to do, You feel some that's what Second Maharaj was mentioning in the class. You feel some dis-ease. You feel uncomfortable. You feel like there was something wrong there. Like maybe I didn't say what I was meant to say. I didn't react the way I was meant to react. You feel a bit uncomfortable because Krishna's within the heart. And he was saying, I want you to act like this. I want you to do this. And we did something different. Now, why am I linking all this to being principle-centered? These principles of Dharma, they come from Krishna. One of the names of Krishna is Dharmaraj. Right? Why? Because actually, Dharma comes from him. In the first canto of the Bhagavatam, when the sages ask, what is the ultimate religion, right? And the answer is given, the ultimate religion is that which allows people to develop loving service to Krishna, right? That's the ultimate Dharma, ultimately. So being principle-centered means that you're aligned with Dharma, and Dharma means you're aligned actually with Krishna's laws. No one in the entire history of humanity is able to break Krishna's laws. All that we do is we break ourselves against his laws. It's such a deep thing. One day there'll be a deeper study on this. But if people live aligned to Krishna's laws, things become prosperous, right? And the ultimate law is the law of bhakti. The ultimate Dharma is Sanatana Dharma or Bhakti Dharma. That means not only should you live according to Krishna's laws, which are Dharma, but you should live according to Krishna's laws for Krishna's pleasure. You should use those laws to produce something in service to him, right? So what we have in the modern society, and the reason why it's so chaotic, is that they're breaking the law on two dimensions. One, we're going against the natural laws of God in terms of how we interact with the world and Krishna's energy. So we're going against the laws of Dharma. And we're also going against the laws of Sanatana Dharma, meaning that we're not doing things for his pleasure. So there's two dimensions. So you have some people who are pious. So they follow the laws of Dharma, but they don't do it for the pleasure of Krishna. So it's still breaking the law. You see, it's still breaking the law. The most important is we try to do what pleases Krishna, because if you do what pleases Krishna, it also includes acting properly. We see this, right? For example, if someone becomes a devotee, I want to please Krishna, then they're going to follow the 4 regulative principles as well. No meat eating, gambling, intoxication, illicit sex. You see? So pleasing Krishna also includes acting according to his direction, which includes the laws of Dharma. So that's the most important, that's the all-inclusive. But even from the material point of view, if people don't follow the laws of Dharma, you have so much chaotic problems in our lives. And so it's increasingly important to do both. Let's move on. So that's principle-centered. That's number 6. Number 7, they're powerful visionaries. This is really important. I gave a seminar on visualization. There's a class, I think it's called The Power of Visualization by Bhakti Tirtha Swami. And he makes a very important point that we often imagine things that we don't want. You know, there's a lot of money that people are making, pushing this idea of the law of attraction. It's not completely true. It's a bit of a spin, but there is some truth in it, meaning that the super soul within the heart, he reciprocates according to the desires of a person. Now, how does he understand the desire of a person? He sees it in the form of the individual's meditation, right? Desire is a meditation. It's a meditation imbued with energy, imbued with an energy called emotion, right? Emotion means literally energy in motion. So when we contemplate something that we want and we have a strong desire for it, there's an enthusiasm for that particular point, then we're literally putting before the super soul within the heart a particular vision. The difficulty is that when the mind is in tamas, to whatever degree, then what we tend to contemplate are circumstances that we don't want. What we tend to contemplate are situations that we don't want, and we energize them with a very negative emotion, right? We energize, so we have a vision that goes before the super soul of something that we don't want because we're in tamas, so we're worrying. And then we energize that particular vision that we don't want with a negative emotion, which begins with F. What negative emotion do we energize when we think about something that we don't want? Fear, exactly. You see? So it's the same principle of visualization, but it's visualization in the mode of ignorance, where I'm visualizing what I don't want and I'm energizing it with a negative emotion, which, if the individual has the karma for it, has now increased the likelihood that that negative situation is going to manifest in my life. Now, leadership means powerful visionary, but in the mode of goodness. It's the opposite expression of it. Okay, so I'm now visualizing what I do want, but more than that. See, in the mode of passion, I may visualize what I do want. And the energy may be, or the emotion may be greed, it may be lust, it may be pride, right? So I'm energizing with emotions in the mode of passion, and I have a vision in the mode of passion. What does it mean to have a vision in the mode of passion? It's selfish. It's prestige driven. It's my own gain driven. You see? So the vision is in passion and the emotions that energize it are in passion. But a leader has a vision in goodness, and the energy or the emotions that energize it are emotions in goodness as well. Let's give an example. So what do I mean by a vision in goodness? If I'm a leader, it's not about me. If I'm a leader, I'm meant to have a vision which includes the ultimate well-being of the people that I'm leading and the people that I'm serving. Now, what do I mean by this? There's two dimensions here. The people that I'm leading are my team. The people that I'm serving are my audience. So, for example, we're doing a preaching program. Let's say we're doing some university programs. Now, my team are the people who help to arrange the programs. My audience are the people who are going to attend that program. You see? So there's at least two constituents. And therefore, my vision has to include outcomes which are good for the team and good for the audience. Okay? So we want to have a first-class program. I want the team to have the facility and resources to be able to do a good job. I was speaking to someone on this call, and they were telling me about an opportunity that they have in America. And it was amazing just listening to what they were sharing. It was a communication, rather. I think it was just messaging back and forth. And to be honest with you, I got some specific insight from what they shared with me, because it helped me to understand that actually in leadership, one of the most important things is to be able to facilitate. My spiritual master used to speak about this a lot, how a leader has a healthy appreciation of resources. Bhakti Charamaj told one devotee that about leadership. He said that the leader has to have a vision. They have to be able to infuse or inspire other people towards that vision. And they have to facilitate. They have to be able to facilitate people towards that vision. You see? Now, facilitation means many things. And we talked about this in terms of protection. Protection is physical resources. So that facilitation, when I was getting this message from this devotee, and they all know who they are. When I was getting this message from this devotee, I understood, yeah, unfortunately, sometimes we have people whose character isn't very good, but they've got lots of facility, right? They can facilitate. And then we have someone, sometimes, so they don't have good character, but they can facilitate. Sometimes we have people who have very good character, but they may not be able to facilitate in some way. Ideally, the leader has a vision and they're able to facilitate also, right? They have vision, character, and able to facilitate. Obviously, facilitation is relative to whatever the project is. So if the project is something very, very big and it requires actual buildings and so on, they may need to be able to facilitate in that way. And that doesn't mean that they have to have the money, but it may mean that they have access to the resources that will allow that to happen, you know? So whatever it is. But this idea of a vision which includes the outcomes for the team and the outcomes for the audience who are being served, that's the point. So vision in the mode of goodness is seeing something which is beneficial, and it can include the leader as well, because that's the healthy thing, right? Because there's an argument for mode of goodness, meaning outcomes which are also beneficial for the leader in a specific sense, right? So ignorance is sentimentality. Passion is self-centered. Goodness includes healthy self-care. I remember a class that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj gave. He said, we want money so we don't have to worry about money. I was talking to Kripa Moya Prabhu about this recently. I said, sometimes we've seen devotees, in the name of Krishna consciousness, they are neglecting themselves. And then when they're neglecting themselves, like, you know, they say they don't actually have an income. They think, I'm a devotee, I'll just do devotional service. That's fine. That's fine to do that if you're full-time and you live in the temple. But if you don't live in the temple and you have to maintain yourself and you don't have a job, then at some point you're going to be in trouble, because you've got no means to maintain yourself, but you have things that you need to actually pay for. It's not sustainable. So the vision in the mode of goodness, we know the mode of goodness includes the concept of sustainability and maintenance. How do we know that? Because we know through the guna avatars. Shiva is the guna avatar who resides over the mode of ignorance, destruction. We know that Brahma is the guna avatar who resides over the mode of passion, creation or initiation. We know that Vishnu is the guna avatar who resides over the mode of goodness, and we know that Vishnu is the maintainer. So one of the things that I found very, very interesting, and one of the things that you can use to immediately alert you to whether a project is going to be able to keep going, is you look to see, is the project set up in such a way that it can keep going? Sometimes devotees, they have some utsahan mai. They're so enthusiastic, they start something and it's wonderful, but they don't at some point look at how to maintain it. And then, you know, all right, they started this project, it's wonderful, but they've not trained up anyone to keep it going, right? They don't have the resources to keep it going. They don't have the people to keep it going. So that means unless we change the way that we operate in this project, the project is doomed to fall apart eventually. You see? And it happens a lot in ISKCON, right? So the vision, a leader is a powerful visionary. His or her vision includes the maintenance, the well-being, and the outcome of the audience and the people who are doing the service, right, or the team. I'll give you a very interesting example. I was asked, Kripa Moya told me recently that there's one devotee, he's a Prabhupada disciple actually. He's doing some research. And in the research that he's doing, he's trying to understand, you know, the preaching projects which are successful. He's trying to understand what are the elements of the preaching projects which are successful in our movement in order to see how they can be replicated. And I think about this stuff all the time. And so I told Kripa Moya, I said, it's very simple. I've meditated on this over many years, and I've seen there's a formula for preaching success in our movement. And I said that where the preaching projects have been successful, they all follow one formula. That means they preach, they give Krishna consciousness according to the nature of the audience and the nature of their situation, right? I said, as long as they do that, the projects are always successful. And I gave an example, because I remember speaking to Kripa Moya's son, Mali, we were abroad, and we were speaking, and he was talking about the Gurukuli bus tour. He was saying that how that program, it really inspired him to take his Krishna consciousness seriously. And I was thinking about my own youth in Krishna consciousness, and how, I mean, it was just such an incredible experience. And I was thinking, why was it so incredible? And the formula really came to me. What happens is, as long as people are given Krishna consciousness consistently in a way that according to their situation and their nature, if it ticks those human needs, then they imbibe it, they become enthusiastic, and it takes them to the next level. So what do I mean? Let's give a very tangible example. So youth, someone's a young person in Krishna consciousness. I've heard about so many young people who are born in the movement who are not into Krishna consciousness. And I've spoken to some of them, and they told me why. They told me, we were forced to come to Bhagavatam class when we were very young. So let's say you're 6, 7 years old and you're forced to come to Bhagavatam class. That class isn't meant for you. It's meant for adults. So the class is everything you're hearing, it basically goes over your head. You want to run around and play, you can't, right? When you want to raise your voice, you're told to just keep quiet and sit down and just listen. So you're bored, you can't express your natural behavior, which is to run around and to play because you're still a young person. You're forced to submit to adults who've put you in a situation which has nothing to do with where you are. Therefore, it leaves a negative samskar. It leaves a negative association in your mind and heart in relation to Krishna consciousness. So when you're older, you have that negative samskar playing out in your unconscious mind, and therefore you're not so interested or you're not so enthusiastic to practice. Now let's look at the opposite. So Mali was telling me he loved the bus tour, and I saw that even in my own youth. I loved the Krishna consciousness. Why? Because it was given in a way that was meaningful for a young person. What does a young person need? Fun, excitement. What else do they need? They need to bond with other young people, right? What else do they need? They need outlets to be creative, right? What else do they need? They need self-awareness. As a young person, they need to understand more about who they are, right? What kind of person am I? What should I be doing? They need to understand more about in the youth phase of life. We need to start to gain our orientation in life. Where should I be giving my focus and attention? So when those human needs are met through Krishna consciousness, in a Krishna conscious way, along with giving the conclusion of Krishna consciousness, which is that we're meant to dedicate our life to developing our Krishna consciousness and spreading it. So the formula I saw, and I checked that formula against all the different successful programs. I thought, yeah, it fits every single program that's successful. Every single program that's successful. They're given Krishna consciousness according to the nature of the audience and the nature of their situation. When I saw that, I thought, that's the formula. So I shared that with Kripa Moya. And I think he'll pass it on to this person who's doing the research. Similar thing when people are grahastas. You've got children and they're trying to tell you to come to a program, but there's no facility for your children. So you're going to sit in the class with your kids kicking and screaming because they want to run around and play. Why wasn't there a creche facility for the children? You see, what it says is that the leader, they did not create the vision that included the well-being of the audience. You see, and that's why the program didn't succeed. Yeah, you can't be a leader and be self-centered. The leader has to be sufficiently balanced so that he or she is able to have enough headspace to actually meditate on the people that they're trying to serve. We made this point from a different angle last session. It's really important. The leader has to create their life in such a way they have space to think. And if the leader's selfish, then what happens? See, our meditation, it follows the modes. A leader who's self-centered, they will think about their own self all the time. A leader who's in the mode of ignorance, they won't think about anything. They'll neglect to think about anything. They'll just do what things in the immediate moment when there's an emergency. That's what the ignorance does. It means I don't notice myself. I don't notice anyone else either, right? But a leader in the mode of goodness, their meditation is actually split in a healthy way. They are looking after themselves, right? But in a very specific way. Prabhupada reflects this in the letter where he says our first principle is to save ourselves and then others. He says, or both can go on simultaneously. That meditation reflects a meditation in the mode of goodness. See, if you neglect yourself, you'll at some point, you'll become a failure in serving other people, right? If you're drowning, you can't look after anyone else. So the leader's meditation also includes a healthy sense of self-care, but they don't overdo it. You see, there's a healthy sense of self-care, but it's self-care in connection to service. So they look after themselves so that they can serve. So their meditation is always on service. And also that vision of service includes their own maintenance so that they can continue to serve. I'm going to throw something out for you guys. One of the things I'm going to ask you to do is I want you to think about, if you've not been doing so already, I want you to think about your journey in ISKCON, your journey in Krishna consciousness. I want you to think about how you can arrange your life so you can be Krishna conscious from the cradle to the grave. Not just, I'm excited now because I've got a nice project. Okay, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. For some of you, you should also think, even when you're young, how do I set up my life so that at a later age, I can retire? And I have the facility that I need so that when I retire, I can just dedicate myself full time to spreading Krishna consciousness and to practicing Krishna consciousness. Some of you may think, oh, I'm young, it's far off. No, you are young. Some of you are young. But a plan is more powerful the earlier the plan is begun. Okay? So I want you to think about that. How do I arrange my life? And what does that mean for me now? Maybe it just means I start to pull away some savings now, so that by the time I reach a particular age, the savings have built up, and therefore I'm in a position where I can retire and I can dedicate myself full time, so I don't have to also do a day job to maintain, the house and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so this idea of vision, the leader is a powerful visionary, and his or her vision includes their well-being so that they can maintain their Krishna consciousness. It includes the well-being of the audience that they're trying to serve. It includes the well-being of the team that they're leading. Okay, that vision is a vision in the mode of goodness. And then the energy or the emotion, the emotion that can drive that vision is enthusiasm, real utsahan, right? It's very interesting. Prabhupada, in Nectar of Instruction, when he talks about enthusiasm, utsahan, it's very interesting. He translates it as endeavor with intelligence. So that implies that it's not just a feeling, but it implies that it's actually the spiritualization of both the heart and the head. Yeah, it's a spiritualization of both the heart and the head. Some people, they're very much into the head and they don't engage the heart. Some people, they're very much into the heart, but they don't engage the head. For things to work, you have to use both. Right? You have to have a plan that's realistic and makes sense. And you have to have an enthusiasm. And you know what's funny about the head and the heart? The head and the heart are two sides of the same coin. If your plan's realistic, it will protect your enthusiasm, because you can maintain your enthusiasm because what you're saying is actually practical. See, we sometimes see devotees like that. Their plan is not practical. So they're very enthusiastic. And then after a while, you see that the plan's falling apart because it was never practical. And because the plan is falling apart, they start to lose their enthusiasm. You see? So the head protects the heart, actually. If you're realistic, you'll protect your enthusiasm. And the other side is also true. If the enthusiasm is grounded, it will help you, it will provide the impetus and the inspiration to sit down and come up with a realistic plan. It will also, healthy enthusiasm will give you the energy to create a plan and to keep going back to the plan and to keep adjusting it as you find out more about the journey that you're on. Yeah, because it takes some energy to keep coming back and say, yeah, we had a good plan, it was good, but I think we have to tweak this, right? And then later on you find out something else. But I'm still enthusiastic, I'm still inspired, so then I'm going to come back and I'm going to adjust the plan this way, right? So it gives you the energy to keep going, actually, to keep going, to keep learning, to keep growing, to keep revising your plan. So your enthusiasm gives you the energy to come back to the plan and to admit that plan was good. It was good in this way, but we need to adjust this. But when people lack enthusiasm, then after a while, they don't have the energy. It's like, oh, I can't be bothered, or it's too much. I can't keep working on the plan. But that's because your enthusiasm's dying. So the head and the heart are two sides of the same coin. The intelligence and the heart are two sides of the same coin. Some people, if you're only one-sided, you're actually going to affect the other side. Yeah, you're going to affect the fullness, because the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Head and heart together makes for a much more powerful Krishna conscious experience. Okay, so let's go on. Number 8, they keep everyone engaged according to their propensities. Yeah, this is a big one. I was, I'll tell you honestly, I was working, one job that I had was one of the worst jobs I had. I was a manager in a company. And for years I was working in that company, but I wasn't in the management role. And then I took on management. And I can do it, but the issue was the way that the head of the company had set things up. She was well-intentioned. So there were some people in the company, and they had a certain role, which they could do. And after a certain point, the funding ran out for that particular role that they were doing. And the head of the company, she had a good heart. So she could have told them at that point, we've no longer got funding for your particular jobs. So we're going to have to let you go. But what she said to them is, look, we've run out of funding for your particular jobs, but we don't want to just get rid of you. That'll be a bit harsh. We've got new funding for slightly different roles. So if you want, we can keep you in the company, but the job you're going to do is slightly different. Now, of course, they all said yes, because they just want to keep their job. They want to keep earning money. Okay. So they were given, so the first role that they had was much more one-to-one. We call this pastoral help. They were working with young people, giving them one-to-one, having one-to-one meetings, giving them some guidance. Now the role shifted to one where they would have to do more teaching. Now with the pastoral guidance they were doing, they were just about managing to do that work, just about managing. I would say they weren't doing it very well, in my humble opinion, right? But they were just about managing. The funding was there for them to do a slightly different role where they'd have to teach more. Now, these personalities, they did not have that ability, right? And let's say not just they did not have that ability, they were very far from that ability. But they all said yes because they wanted to keep the job. And of course, if people don't know about propensities, then you fall into this idea that anyone can do anything equally well and it's all wonderful. But that's not what our tradition actually says. Now let's make one caveat here. This Krishna consciousness movement is empowered by this mood of surrender. So it's not that we should not do the needful if it's required. And there's a misconception about the varnas. People think that each varna, they can do certain things distinctly and they can't do anything else. That's not true, right? It's not true. Well, the Varnas, they have a natural gift in a certain area. But all natures can do anything, especially for a short period of time. It's just that they may not be as enthusiastic, they may not be as good at it, and it may take them longer, right? And therefore they may not be as motivated in that area. So this is to give a complete picture. Anyway, so the head of the company gave these people a slightly different role, which required more teaching. And then I became the manager for that team, and it was like pulling teeth. It was horrible because they weren't able to do the job properly. They were doing a poor job, and then the pressure was coming on me in order to get them to perform to a higher level. But I was fully aware these people can't teach. They're not good at teaching. And because they're not good at teaching, it was so interesting. I was watching them and I would see they were struggling. They were struggling so much to prepare classes, to teach the class. They were losing enthusiasm when they were giving the classes. And therefore, that lack of enthusiasm and that lack of quality was spilling over to the students who were getting really poor classes. And then what was happening as a result, the students were not going to the classes because they said that in the classes, we don't learn anything. It's the same thing every week. So you saw this whole spillover effect. And it was ultimately the fault of the head of the company, who actually was well-intentioned. They were well-intentioned, but they didn't understand propensities. They did not understand propensities. So even in my professional job, I teach leadership. So we've had so many discussions with, and these are really powerful leaders, right? Really powerful leaders, you know, in the financial services. I mean, these people are successful. They've been leading 10, 20, 30, 40 years, huge track record, dealing with multi-billion-pound projects, global projects, you know, big name projects. And we often have this discussion about the square peg in the round hole. That sometimes a company hires someone and they're a good hire. I mean, you've hired someone, they're conscientious, they're hardworking, they're professional, they're expert, but they're underperforming because you've got them in the wrong role. You see? It's not that they're lazy, they're hardworking. It's not that they're incompetent, they're competent, but they're in the wrong role. So the square peg in a round hole. I was giving a presentation to a group of international business people. And this is like in a Krishna conscious presentation, to a group of international business people from around the world, very successful. They all have their own businesses. And we were talking about this particular point. And one of the things I shared with them, I was going to make a graph. I didn't actually make the graph, but I was going to make a graph for them. And I was talking about this point. What I was showing them is, let's say that you have someone who's naturally good at management. So if you give them an hour, then in that 1 hour, they will produce 100 units of output in terms of management. That same person who's good at management, you give them something else to do. Let's say counseling. Because they're not good at counseling, in that same hour, their output will be 20 units of counseling output. So it's 1 hour. If you give them management, 100 units of output. If you give them counseling, because they're not good at counseling, it's 20 units of output. Okay? Let's say you have someone else. Someone else is they've got a natural talent for strategy and teaching. So you get them to do strategy and teaching. You give them 1 hour, they produce 100 units of output in terms of strategy and teaching. And when I say 100 units of output, I mean both in terms of quality and quantity. Okay? But that same person who's good at strategy and teaching, you give them management to do, they only produce 10 units of management. Because they're not skilled in management. So in that 1 hour, depending on what you give them to do, you get a much greater return on the hour in terms of output, or a much smaller return in terms of output. Now, you aggregate that to an entire company. You aggregate that to an entire company. Or in our case, you aggregate that to an entire movement. What happens? You can have, and we have this unfortunately, there are many places in our movement where people are working incredibly hard and the output is incredibly low. Because, and this is the point number 8, because the leaders are not keeping everyone engaged according to their propensities, even though they have the opportunity to. And this is really important. I want to stress this because there's sometimes resistance from our managers in our movement, and I can understand why. I can really understand why, right? I'm not in the position where, well, actually I do management in terms of spiritual projects, but I can understand where they're coming from. So we shouldn't misunderstand this. Sometimes as devotees, we're like, I'm not going to do that because it's not my nature, Prabhu, right? And there's an argument when there's more choice, but we have so many projects where there's so few people that to get it off the ground, it literally has to be all hands on deck. Now, having said that, actually, I'm going to ask you this question. Having said that, are we doing the all hands on deck? Are we doing the everyone has to just chip in because we have to do the needful? Are we doing that only when we need to, or are we doing that often when we don't need to? What do you think in this movement? What do you think has been going on? Do we do, okay, all hands on deck, do the needful because it has to be done? Are we doing it only when it has to be done? Or are we doing it even at times where we could have organized things a bit better? What's your experience in our communities? I'd like to just see, I'm going to ask you to type into the chat window. I'm going to wait till I see some responses. Yes, Sharadia, you're absolutely right. See, what we have is, so my spiritual master spoke about how that you can have also community by design and you can have unintentional community. So the same thing happens in our projects. We can have projects by design where we're working on a project, we work out what needs to be done, and then we go and find people who can do those particular things. That's a project by design. It also means a team by design. We've got a project, we need to, for the project to work, we're going to do these things. Okay, now we go and find the right people so that the project, we find the right team to make that project happen, or we get as close to the ideal as possible, meaning that this project, for it to be successful, we need people with this skill, this skill, this skill, and this skill. And then we get as close as we can to that skill set to make it happen. We don't say, oh, but they're a nice devotee. They chant Hare Krishna really nicely. Okay, but they need to be able to do accounting. Do they know how to do accounting? They don't know how to do accounting properly, but we should still include them because they're a really nice devotee. Okay, but now they can't do accounting. And the project requires them to do accounting. And because the project requires accounting and they can't do accounting, there's a big issue in the project. And now the tax people are coming to the temple and they're going to close down the temple because the accounts are bad. So this is what's called sentimentality. Now, of course, there is a middle ground whereby, let's say someone has some willingness to learn accounting and they have the ability to learn it or to get it even to a basic level. Great, bring them in, okay? But my point is, we're not doing the best that we can. And this is heartbreaking because the point is, if we don't do the best we can, it means that there are people who are not receiving Krishna consciousness, even though we shouldn't be giving it to them. I was listening to a class this morning and I was reminded, it was a podcast actually, a devotee podcast. And I was reminded of the conversation, because they mentioned it in the podcast, the conversation that Prabhupada had with Giriraj Maharaj. Prabhupada asked Giriraj Maharaj, how would this movement continue in my absence? Giriraj Maharaj said, Prabhupada, if we chant Hare Krishna and he gave the very direct devotional answers, then the movement will carry on. Prabhupada corrected him He said, by organization and intelligence. You see? Now, that does not mean that the devotional side is not important. It is important. So let's not misunderstand. It doesn't mean that that's not an issue. It is an issue. And it's the most important, I'll say, actually. The most important, because that will draw Krishna's mercy. And ultimately, Krishna is the one who's doing everything. But Prabhupada emphasized organization and intelligence because that's our endeavor to get Krishna's mercy. You see? So we're doing the best that we can in a mood of devotion, and then Krishna sees, oh, they're doing the best that they can with a mood of devotion, and then Krishna supplements and completes the circle. So it's not like I'm going to be disorganized, I'm going to do things in a really mode of ignorance way, I'm not going to try to do things properly, but it's okay because I'm going to depend on Krishna. That's not what it means. That's not what Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Arjuna, do your duty for my pleasure and then rely on me to give the result. That's the full formula. You do the best that you can with a mood of devotion, and then I, Krishna says, will come through and I will perfect things in the way that I want, in the way that ultimately is best. Okay, so this is how the two things come together. So some devotees, again, in the lower modes, we go to extremes. Either we just don't bother doing things in an organized way, and we just think that I'm a devotee, Krishna should make it happen, or it's all organization and arrangement, but with no devotion there. And of course, when it's all organization and arrangement with no devotion there, we either don't get the devotional outcomes, or if anything happens, we think it's because we're so great, rather than understanding, no, you're not the doer, Prabhu, in this sense. So these are both extremes. So we should engage people where possible, right? And in other words, where we have opportunity to design things wisely, then we should do it. Now, sometimes there's also a middle ground whereby there's just loads of people who want to be involved. Yes, great. More the merrier. But then as a leader, try to see that they're engaged in a way that's meaningful, that they can actually do it nicely. I'm sure many of us have been in spiritual projects where people are involved and they're doing something and it's being done poorly. And then other people start to become frustrated. So someone's managing and the management is done poorly. So therefore, things are done last minute, it's a bit chaotic. And then it's because it's a bit chaotic, the audience for the program, they think this program looks a little bit chaotic and disorganized. And then the person who's presenting thinks, you know what, I don't want to be associated with this project because it looks chaotic. And if I'm this person giving the class, it looks like I'm responsible for the fact that it's poorly designed, or the food has been cooked badly because the people who are cooks couldn't cook. And it's like, oh no, the food tastes horrible, it's undercooked. Why, oh no, the person who's cooking doesn't actually know how to cook. And then the audience are now eating the prasadam and they think this is horrible. You see? So it's not like that. There's room to maneuver, there's room to train, there's room to learn. And where there's emergencies or we just don't have access to the full skill set, we do the best we can. This is the point, right? So therefore, this point about engaging people according to their propensities is like a North Star. We try to come as close to the ideal as possible, while doing it in a way which is still devotional and which still encourages everyone. This is important. So I'm going to give the formula again. We come as close to the ideal as possible while still doing it in a way which is devotional and which engages and encourages everyone. Now, why have I said that? So if you have someone who you've inherited in the team, right? And they've got something that, they want to be involved, but they may not have a certain skill set, then it can be that they assist someone who's got that skill set. And in that way they learn. It could be that they go away and learn that skill set. Or it could be that through the relationship, you say, look, we want you on board, but we also see that this may not be your strength. Wonderful, but we want you on board. Let's look at what you can do, right? Let's see what we can bring into the project and into the service whereby you can be engaged, right? So let's find something for you to do so that you're also part of it, right? So in many cases with a project, there's additional things that we can do. For example, you're doing a program, an outreach program, and someone's part of the team that you inherited. They're not so good at organization, but maybe they can assist in the organization, or they're not, or maybe the question is to ask them, what are you good at doing? Right? And they say, oh, you know what, I'm good at making, posters and graphics. Great. We're going to engage you in the advertising for the program. You see? So this is the point, engaging people according to their propensities. What's implicit within that particular approach is that you have to know the people, or you have to at least endeavor to know the people, and you have to also watch the people. Bhishma Dev says, it's a very powerful quote from the Mahabharata. Bhishma Dev says that the king should know his or her citizens just like a mother knows her children. And I think that's so powerful, because a parent, a good parent, really knows her children, right? And it even goes on to say that the king should care for them accordingly. So a good parent really understands what's going on, right? They know what their children are like. Oh, my child, he's like this, or she's like that. And that can help to engage accordingly. Now, I just want to give you a reason why this is so important. And actually, you're going to tell me, right? Let's do this as a conversation. So you can unmute and you can turn on your cameras if you wish to as well. I want to hear from someone. How does it make it what's the benefit to you as a leader when your team are engaged according to their talents and motivations? What does it bring to the team, to the leadership, to you, to the relationship, to the output, when the people are engaged according to their propensities? Anyone? I'm going to ask you to unmute and to share. I know you can type it in the chat, but I'd like you to unmute and to share. What's the benefit?
Hi, Krishna Prabhu, can you hear me?
Haribo Abhishek, I can hear you loud and clear.
Jai, it's so encouraging, and I feel like I'm being topped up listening to you speak. It's been so beautiful.
It's great to see you on the call. Please share.
Jai, what I've noticed is that when devotees, and myself included, that when we are engaging in service according to our talents or propensity, that it sparks creativity exponentially.
Yes. And
the enthusiasm is like almost you have to try and contain it. That when someone's in the right space, and and when you start to see that when people get moved into the place, into a role that they're really passionate and excited about, and that's who they are, in the journey of aligning people to those roles, sometimes they can steer the ship quicker than we need to be going at that point. And it's almost like you have to calm them down and go, oh, okay, great, just let the rest catch up, But that's it's a very comforting and very positive experience when that happens.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing that. And let's be honest, enthusiasm is contagious. You have a team of people who are serving to their propensities. They feel good about what they do, right? They feel enthusiastic about what they do. They become advocates for the project. Yeah, come and join us. It's fantastic. I love what I'm doing. It's exciting. People, my spiritual master used to say to a lot, people want to be part of something that they feel is going to be successful. You see? But it's something which is, breaking down, failing. People are like, oh dear, I'm going to have to, serve in this project. It's the opposite. It's also true. People steer, if something keeps falling apart, people start to feel there's something wrong. In fact, that's actually something else you can look out for. And I'll take questions in a moment. One thing you can look out for is signs that a person's needs in a particular service are not being met. That's the first sign that the project is going to have some issues, right? Now, of course, a leader can't fulfill everyone's. It's not like you're their parents, right? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? But the legitimate responsibilities that a leader has, he or she should be making sure that they are actually fulfilling them and fulfilling them consistently. This is why I'm giving you these 10. Even before we deep dive, and in one sense, we are deep diving already. These 10 principles are so powerful that any leader can sit down with these 10. This is how deep it gets. You can sit down with these 10 principles that I've been speaking through, that we're discussing, and on a regular basis, you can just see, am I doing each of these? And you can tick. Yep, number 1, right? So number 1, I'm a leader of a project. Am I showing love for people, and am I being sensitive to their emotions and needs? Tick. Number 2, in my interactions and in the way that I'm fostering the culture, because it's not just from the leader, it's between members of the team. Number 2, am I helping the people to feel happy and secure, right? So am I helping people to feel happy and secure? Am I building the team culture? Am I helping them to get to know one another? Tick. Number 3, are we looking to create lasting value at all times? Lasting value also means devotional credit. When people are doing something which is Krishna conscious service, the credit is eternal, right? Tick. Number 4, right, it says here, they're philosophers, they seek to convey ultimate abiding truth. Are we being truthful? Are we looking at what's ultimately best, what Krishna wants? Are we having those discussions? Tick. Number 5, they lead from the inside out, knowing that character is power. Okay, so how's my character? Maybe I need to get feedback from the team, right? How do I come across? Am I acting the right way? Am I doing anything in my behavior towards you which is upsetting you or that you feel I could change? Okay, no, your character's quite good. I find that you're trustworthy, but okay, great, tick. Number 6, principle centered. Am I treating everyone fairly? Am I acting by principle, right? Is it clear the principles that I'm acting by? Or is it sometimes it seems like am I seeming sometimes like, they call it situational ethics. Am I just doing what's convenient, even at the cost of doing what's fair and what's just? Oh, no, actually, you seem to, oh, good, tick. Number 7, powerful visionaries. Does the team know where we're going? Right? Do the team have a clear idea of what good looks like, what we're trying to achieve in this project? And it's not something that you say once, by the way. The vision has to be said again and again and again, right? So that everyone really knows. We know what the mission is. We know where we're going. We know what we're trying to achieve. We know what good looks like, right? And then we can keep seeing, are we getting there? Right? How are we doing? Right? And that vision, as we said before, it includes everyone. Right? Everyone feels I've got a place in this, right? And that vision means that the success of the vision, the success of the mission is not the leader's success, it's everyone, right? Celebrating successes. Yeah, Sham, I saw the way you did that post on Facebook. Sham, it was awesome. Thank you very much. Sharadia, I mean, the way you organized, it was like the incarnation of Yudhisthira. Thank you very much. Rajanath Gopal, that I saw the email that you put out. It was a work of art. We need to send that to the GBC so that other ISKCON projects can use it. That vision, that sense that we're all in this together and it's a collective success. So they're powerful visionaries. And then this last one, keeping everyone engaged according to their propensities. So linking to what Abhishek said, when you have a team who are acting according to their propensities to the extent that they can, right? Then it's funny. This is what was really interesting. I'll be honest. I sometimes had disagreements with certain devotees. And what was happening was that particular devotee, he was just trying to tell everyone to just do what you're told, right? And, I didn't agree with him, not because there's not a need to do the news. There is a need, right? So you can't be like, oh, I'm not going to do it because it's just not my nature, Prabhu. It's a bit of a cheating mentality. But the reason why I had an issue with that devotee is because he could have organized better. He wanted everyone to just do what they told because it's just easy for him, right? So so what I didn't appreciate is he didn't have consideration for the people he's leading. That's what really upset me. If he had said, okay, we're trying to see what we can do, but we do have these emergencies and we sometimes just need people to help out, I'm all for that, right? Because I know you care about those people. You are trying to see where you can engage them in healthy ways, but you also see that sometimes it's not always possible. So you're asking them to do both. Fantastic. I've been in that situation, so I could empathize when people do that because it's both. I'm considerate of you and I'm considerate of the project. And the project is also for you. So it's ultimately, it's all about you. Now, what's the amazing thing? The amazing thing is when we engage people according to their propensities, when we can, what happens is those same people are also ready to go beyond their propensity. Isn't that interesting? You considered me, right? By considering what I can actually do. And therefore I'm considering you when something comes up, which is an emergency, which I'm not necessarily so good at, but I'm going to do it because if you consider me, I'm going to consider you. But the leader has to make the first move. You see how it works, right? And so all of these principles we've been sharing, they have a cumulative effect where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. When we consider the other person, they'll consider us. Let me say that again. I've got a special thing about being very precise, right? You can give an explanation in the mode of ignorance, which is too general. An explanation in the mode of passion, which is in the right ballpark area, but not exactly the essential point. And then you can give an explanation in the mode of goodness. So let me say that one again. When you have a decent group of people that you're working, they're decent people, and you consider them, and then they'll reciprocate by considering you. You see, if you deal with people who are very tamasic, even though you consider them, they'll just take advantage. So it doesn't work with everyone. It works when the people are of a certain decent caliber, right? Because when they're of a decent caliber, then they actually appreciate what you're doing for them. Do you see the point? You see the difference, right? That's why, and we said this last session, that's why it's actually revolutionary, but actually there should be training on leadership for everyone, even if they're not a leader, because you need to train good leaders and you need to train people who are good followers, meaning that they're able to appreciate good leadership. The reason why in the world right now there's so much bad politics is because, to be honest, people aren't trained to recognize good leadership. So if the people are too much in passion and ignorance, then someone can just appeal to their greed, or appeal to their lust, or appeal to their selfishness. And in that way, they can gain power. So you can have a good leader and the people will not recognize a good leader because he's going to tell them the truth. And then you can have a bad leader who puts a spin on everything and just promises, yes, if you vote for me, I'll give you lots of money. You won't have to work so hard. He'll promise them, he'll lie to them. He'll promise them things which are unrealistic. But once they voted him into power, it's too late. And because they're naive, they can be lied to, they can be manipulated. You see? And then of course, he'll also lie about the other person. Oh, this person, they're lazy. No, that person's working hard for them. But you tell them, oh, they're lazy, they're no good, they're stupid, they're impractical. They're not impractical. You're just you're just trying to smear their reputation, and you're doing it to these naive people who can be easily manipulated. So then they'll vote for the wrong person. You see how it works? So this point, if we engage people according to their propensities where we can, and if we do it within the context of helping them to know we're doing the best we can, sometimes it won't be possible because sometimes we'll need all hands on deck. You will find that those people, not only will they be willing to stretch, but they'll also be better at stretching. Because when you do something according to your propensity, it gives you additional capacity. And because you have additional capacity, when you need to stretch, you can stretch because you've got additional capacity. You see? See, this is the irony of it. That even the managers who are like, just do what you're told, just do what you're told. The irony is you get them to do what they're told, great, right? As a result, your project is less successful, right? You think that by just telling them to do what they're told, you're gonna get more outcomes. Actually, you've got less outcomes, right? And there's two types of lower outcome. You get less outcome in quantity, but you also get less outcome in quality. So you get less in quantity. We talked about that. The 1 hour, if someone's good at strategy, you give them an hour to do strategy, you get an hour's worth of great strategy. The person's good at strategy and they're not good at management, you get them to do management. In the same hour, you get less management, right? So you've got someone who's not good at strategy doing strategy. You've got someone who's not good at management doing management, right? So then overall, that person who's not good at strategy gives you 20 units of output in strategy. The person who's not good at management gives you 20 units of output in terms of management. So that's 40 units and they both spent 1 hour. So after 1 hour, those two people gave you 40 units of output. If you switched them over and you said, all right, I know you're good at strategy, you do strategy for an hour. I know you're good at management, you do management for an hour. After an hour, they give you 100 units each. It's the same 1 hour, and you've got 200 units of output from those two team members. Whereas because you told them to do just whatever they were told, and it happened to be things that they weren't good at, so you got 200 as output as opposed to 40. That's a difference of 160 units of output. And it's the same two people involved in the same project, but just doing things that they weren't necessarily so good at. So you get less in quality, you get less in quantity, but you also get less in consistency. Because over time, what happens is, in the initial thing, I'm enthusiastic. I'm not good at it, but at least I'm enthusiastic. But as I keep going about it, and it keeps turning out poorly, and it keeps becoming a burden, my enthusiasm to keep doing it actually dies. You know? Now, another hidden cost when people don't act according to their propensities is that they're more likely to notice or to see the cup as half empty, right? They are more likely to get into a negative mindset because their mind isn't fully engaged. When you do something you're really enthusiastic for and you're really good at, your mind's fully engaged. Have you noticed that, right? You get absorbed more easily. But when, there's a saying, the devil makes work for idle hands. And it's also the saying that an idle mind is a devil's workshop. So when people are constantly doing stuff that they're not very good at, even though they don't have to, again, caveat, this is when they don't have to, then they think, oh, it's not very much fun. And their mind is more susceptible to negativity. And what that means is, in a business, it means office politics. In a devotional project, it means more susceptible to criticism and to finding faults. Well, if I have to do that, why is he getting to do stuff that he enjoys doing if I can't do stuff I enjoy doing? Why is he getting all the praise? All that kind of stuff. So it also affects one's ability to be focused and to be more positive and enthusiastic and determined. Yeah. So there's many, many connotations to this to be conscious of. Let's go through the last two quickly because I don't want to go over time. Number 9, they are experts at delegation and empowerment. That relates to what we just said. Delegation. If I know what people are good at. Now there's a whole science to this. Actually, what I'm going to do, we're going to stop here because we've been speaking for some time. I don't want to overwhelm you. When we go to the next session, we'll go through number 9 and things. I want to give you a deep dive into this, okay? Because the last two are very important. So let me stop here and we'll take any questions or comments. Any questions or comments? And Florina, and then I think Rax, you had your hand up, so we'll go to Rax afterwards. Florina.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for this insightful points and for making them so relevant as well. I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Yes, by all means. And thank you for joining, by the way.
Thank you. I just have the question in relation to how best to navigate situation when you give upwards feedback. I feel, and the reason I'm asking this question is because I feel many connection, association in the corporate world, but also I've seen a little bit in ISKCON, where things come to an end because there's no safe space to give upwards feedback.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to understand, if you have any insight into how to navigate those situations.
Thank you so much, Florina. There's a real, we can get in, maybe we'll get into some more in the next session as well, but I'll give you a few things which you'll find really interesting. The Vedic literatures are phenomenal. I was in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is one of the main books of Krishna consciousness. There are some pastimes whereby you have someone junior speaking to someone senior. And if they do it in etiquette, what you'll notice is when the junior person is speaking to someone senior, if they don't have the relationship where they can be very open about, I think we could have done this differently or whatever, then what they will do is there's a Vaishnava etiquette. There's a way of speaking to your seniors whereby you can give feedback indirectly. Because in the Vaishnava etiquette, it said that you're not meant to correct people who are senior to you. You're not meant to tell them, no, you should do this, right? Because it can break down that mood of taking shelter. So the seniors are meant to give shelter, but in order for us to get shelter, we have to also have a mood of surrender. You see? So if I want protection, I've got to be ready to go under the umbrella, right? However, if there's a couple of things. First of all, when we are the senior, we should be ready to receive feedback. We should encourage it. What do you think we could do differently? How do you think we could improve? So the first thing is sometimes just wait. If they're a senior who, if they open the door, then run through the doorway, right? So if they ever say, you know, how do you think this went? Well, now you asked, you know, I think we could have done this, and this. That's one thing. So timing is one thing. Timing is also important because when people are under stress or when they feel unappreciated, that's the worst time to give developmental feedback because there's more resistance. So there's a whole thing around emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence helps you to understand when to give feedback, how to give feedback. So going back to the scriptures, if you do a careful study, not just of the Bhagavatam, not just of CC, but many places, when you're giving feedback to seniors, you give it as a question, right? So you could say, so let's say that a program started late, you know, you wouldn't say this program you need to start earlier. This program starts too late. What you say is, do you think it would be better if we started the program a bit earlier, like that, you know? So that's one way. If it's a senior who you know is not open to a more open conversation, you can also say to them, no, this is something you can do across the board. You could say, you know, you could start by appreciating what they have done. This is important because what happens in leadership is often leaders are under stress and often they're not trained. This is why I'm so excited to do this, because most of our leaders, they're not trained. They don't know what they're doing. They've just picked up a few things here and there. And in many cases, what they've picked up are from bad examples. You see? So they don't know that was a bad example. So they thought, my senior used to just shout at people and tell them that and push them, right? And so therefore, I think that I should do the same thing. But what we don't see is that leader had a strong relationship with those people. And when you weren't there, that leader was always encouraging people and giving them care and attention. So in the context of that love and attention, when the leader said, it's an emergency, we just need to move on, they were able to take that. Now you don't have that same relationship with them. So then when you shouted them, everyone's like, who the hell are you? Who do you think you're talking to? You see, because it's not the same context. So another thing we can do is say, would it be okay if I shared some ideas? So you get permission, right? Another thing, sorry, back to the point I made earlier, what you do is you begin with appreciation. You know, I really appreciate that you did this. I appreciate that you did this. And you show empathy. I recognize how hard it is to do this, you know? So I really appreciate how much work you put into this. And then off the back of that, you could even say something like, I just noticed that sometimes in some of the other projects, they did this in this way. And I just thought that may help you. You see? So it's not like you failed. I didn't like the way you did this. That was a disaster. You know, why do we, that's terrible. That's a complete failure. It's that, you know, I just noticed that I was just thinking that, you know, I was wondering if this would be helpful for the project, because I think that if we did this in that way, this is how it would help you. You see? And it carries, when you say it like that, it carries a very different energy, because it's no longer, oh, they don't appreciate me. I'm working so hard, you know, no, you know, blah, 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 blah. You know, it's not like, oh, you don't appreciate me. I'm working so hard. Or who do you think you are? You know, you think it's easy. None of that. It becomes something very, very different. It starts, one devotee was telling me that with my spiritual master, he would always begin by expressing appreciation first. I mean, to be honest, he wouldn't always do that. Sometimes he was very firm, but it depends on the context. But it's what's going to work in our relationship, you know? Or another thing you can do is you open up the conversation. So I teach this. I teach feedback to leaders, and it's incredible. So when I first started this topic, I didn't realize how many things that are available. Most people think, oh, it's hard to tell anyone anything. They won't take it. No, there are so many techniques. One of the things that we do at work, one of the things I teach managers at work, after every project, let's say that you're leading a project and you know that some things weren't done so well. At the end of the project, and even while the project is going on, you get the team together. Okay, let's talk about the project. What do you think is going well, team? And the team will tell you, yeah, this is going well. I think that's not going well. And then you say to the team, okay, team, what do you think we could do differently? You see?
Yeah.
Now, you can also do that on a one-to-one. You could say to that manager or that leader, it's a great project. What did you like most about the way the project went? And that leader may say, I like the way that they did this. I like this outcome was really good. And you can even say, I'm curious, you had so many years of experience. What would you do differently next time? And the leader may even say, you know what? I think we started the program too late. Next time I'll do this, next time I'll do that. And then what happens in most cases when people don't feel that they're attacked, when people don't feel that they're being criticized, which causes the people to be defensive, then in many cases, if you ask them the right question, they will come to their own conclusions about what they would do differently. And then you can just reinforce and appreciate their own realization. So they may say, you know what, I think the program was there was a bit too much information. It's like, oh, really? That's interesting. Because I also noticed that, and that's really interesting. So are you saying that, maybe it would have been less points would have been good? Wow, that's incredible. There's a way of doing it. There are many ways of doing it. If you're a leader and you're speaking to juniors, because I'm seeing Sharadia's point, you could do that with juniors, ask them for their own observations. And also, you can do it in the context of the relationship. People are prepared to, you need to develop, as a leader, you need to develop so much trust. If you develop real trust, what will happen is people will come to you and ask you for feedback. If people know, and this goes back to what we said earlier in the previous session about the leader makes people feel happy and secure. There's a lot of insecurity. And so people feel that if they're criticized, you're saying that there's something wrong with them. But if you help people to feel secure, then what happens is you build such a bond that you're saying that I love you unconditionally. And because I love you unconditionally, when I give you some things that you could improve on, it doesn't create insecurity, because you've already established that you're valuable and that you're important. And of course, different degrees of that according to the person's own internal stability. But the more we establish that, then you can say, you know what? I think you did a phenomenal job. What do you think you could have done differently? Great. I also know that. How would you do that differently next time? And you could also say, I love the way you did this. I think that you can become even more successful if you adjust it in this way. So do you see the difference? It's not you did something wrong. It's not the glass is half empty. It's like, that was great. I think you could even take it to another level. I think you could be even more successful if we just tweak this. Another thing as a leader is a mirror effect. If I, as a leader, if I'm open to feedback, then it becomes easier for everyone else to open to feedback. Why? Because if I'm the senior person and people can give me feedback and I take it in a mature, professional, and respectful way, I don't have to agree with it. It may be wrong. It may not be true, but I'm mature. Thank you very much for sharing that. I really, really appreciate that. I appreciate it for this reason. I'm going to take it on board. And I'm going to really think about it. If I appreciate the feedback of my juniors properly, then when I give them feedback, how are they likely to respond? What do you think? Florina, what do you think?
They'll probably be more receptive to what's been said.
Why though? You're right, Florina, but why?
Because they're not seeing it from an ego place. They're seeing it from a place of like from the natural self.
Yeah, so this is the point. So whatever I want my juniors to do, I have to do it first. If I want my juniors to be humble, I should be humble first. If I want my juniors to be tolerant, I should be tolerant first.
Yeah.
If I want my juniors to take seriously studying Prabhupada's books, I should take seriously studying Prabhupada's books first. I need to become the example that I want to see. So anyway, but Florina, to your point, those are some things you can do. With seniors, suggest you can ask things as a question. You can build relationship. You can ask for permission to give feedback. You can even, what this also helps to give feedback. Notice your seniors doing things nicely, because it's a two-way thing about security. Often the leaders are insecure, right? People think, oh, this person's been around for many years. He shouldn't be insecure. She shouldn't be insecure. No, forget that. We're dealing with human nature. Yeah. So we should also understand sometimes our seniors are a bit insecure. So when we catch our seniors doing things correct, it helps them to feel more secure. And then when we say, would it be okay to share a suggestion? Think about that. I've asked you for permission to share a suggestion. That means I'm demonstrating a certain quality towards you, a quality which begins with R. It means I'm showing you what? Florina, any guesses? I'm asking you for permission to give some ideas. It means I'm showing you a lot of, begins with
Empathy.
R. Empathy, yeah, but what else? Begins with R.
Respect.
Exactly.
Respect, yeah.
I'm showing you a lot of respect. There's a whole thing, and I won't get into it now, about how to deal with juniors and seniors. The primary quality that triggers mercy from seniors is to show them respect. That's what causes seniors to give blessings to juniors, is to always deal with people who are senior to us. We deal with them always respectfully. And if you do that one thing, that's the root point. If you deal with your seniors respectfully, you'll find you just get flooded. They can't help it. They'll be inspired to just give you they'll be inspired in their heart to wish you well. And the seniors, when we're senior, the key thing that we have to give to juniors is compassion, right? Because if someone's junior to us, they are still learning. They won't know as much as we do. So we have to be compassionate. You see, there's a whole thing. And with equals, you build you're friendly. So when someone is a peer, you're friendly. When someone is senior, you're respectful. When someone is junior, you're compassionate. Now, of course, you actually give compassion and respect to everyone, but these are the emphases. So with the seniors, there's an emphasis on respect. With a junior, there's an emphasis on compassion. With a peer, there's an emphasis on friendship. Yeah, like that. Okay.
Yeah, that was really good. I got some really good key points. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for your great question. Okay, Rax.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for a great seminar. I've been putting all the principles that you've taught us over the years, and I've now put myself in probably a unique situation whereby I lead two teams, but my primary team, when I took for those who don't know, I work for the Halifax and the branch network. So I manage two branches, but I manage a small branch where I predominantly spend my time in the city, and I work, and we've got head offices around us. Now, when I took over this team, there was no stability. I gave them everything they wanted, hit the fours, physical, mental, the whole lot. So they're all happy. In terms of the team, it's the best performing team in the whole area. We've always been ahead of the curve. I've only been in management for 7 months, coming up to 7 months. But in the process, the bank's also big on inclusion and diversity.
Yes.
So they're giving us exposure to different head office divisions. In that process, opportunities have arisen where I've been applying for jobs, and applications are getting rejected, making it to interview stage, and so on. But I've told this to the team, I'm leading by example, and I'm taking each obstacle, objection or rejection in the right manner. But my question is, one, is that the right thing for me to do to show that I'm applying to go ahead to another division? But at the same time, I've been trying to make the team realize that they've got so much capacity that they can add value and they should be achieving more. So I'm making sure no one is comfortable in their positions and they should be striving for greatness.
That's actually good. See, the point is, everything is dependent upon context. If you're leaving the team because you're going somewhere else, and they feel that you're leaving them because you're abandoning them and they're useless, and I'm bored of you guys, I need to go elsewhere, that will send a negative message. That will be disempowering. But if you're leaving because, okay, I really love you guys, it's great working with you, I need to move on, but this is an opportunity for you guys to step up, right? It's not a negative statement about who you are. It's about where I need to go. And you've also created the environment whereby as you move forward, they're not going to be stuck. then that can be a very positive message. So how you communicate the why behind your behavior is the crucial factor. You see that if you leave a vacuum, it's mode of ignorance. If you communicate the why in a selfish way, like, I don't care about you, I can do better than you guys, I'm going, then that's mode of passion. If you communicate the why, explaining how it will help them, how this is something that you should be doing, but there's a great opportunity for them to come up, then that's communicating your desire to move forward, but in the mode of goodness. And then that will therefore get a positive result. And what you will know, Rax, because you're a natural leader, you see, you want to leave situations on a good note, because actually they'll remember you positively. And as they progress in their career, they move forward. They remember that you were a great manager, and what happens is they will move out into the workplace, either within the company or within other places, and they'll tell everyone Rax was a great manager. And therefore you build your networks by treating everyone properly. It's the same thing in our movement. If you look after the devotees, you're really good, you treat them nicely, then devotees sometimes move countries, they go to different places, but they'll remember this person, he really helped me. He really looked out for me. And so as they progress, you get more opportunities for service. You get more opportunities to be Krishna conscious. You get more opportunities to nourish the association of devotees. But the negative is also true. If they're like, you know what, that person, he was terrible. He just pushed people around. He exploited people. They didn't give you any help. I was speaking with one devotee also on this call about one project that they were involved in, where the leaders were very much not looking after the people under them. And I knew those leaders, and I knew they were like that, to be honest with you. And I thought, yeah, they don't understand. That negative reputation is gonna go around the whole world. But these guys, they're a bit cutthroat, they're a bit ruthless, they're a bit exploitative. They just try and squeeze as much out of you as possible while giving us little back as possible. And then other people who hear about it think, you know what, we're not gonna work for that group. And I know people who do not want to work for that particular project because they've heard negative things about that project. And there's one type of negativity where someone doesn't like you. But the real thing you have to watch out for is the negativity, because what they've said is actually true. No, they were actually taking advantage. And I had to push them before they even gave me what I was due. Right, okay. And when you say something which is true, it has more power. And Krishna's there, it's like, well, I can't argue that was true. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16, the first purport. So it's the purport to verses 1 to 3 in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada writes about fault finding. And he says something very interesting. He says, of course, to call a thief to call a thief is not fault finding. But to call an honest person a thief is. You see the point? So of course, we still have to be careful about unnecessary criticism. But the point is, if someone's like, well, to be honest, this did actually happen. They did try to, undermine me behind my back. That, just to be very, very honest. Whether I know that you're friends with them and you like them, but the truth is, behind my back, they were actually saying these things. They were trying to undermine me. So that's why I keep a distance from them. Even if the person you're saying it to doesn't believe you, if what you're saying is true, Krishna in the heart's like, you know what, actually, he is telling the truth. They did actually try to undermine him behind his back, So I know they're friends with you, but what he's saying he's not lying. That's actually what happened. So you see the point. So we should act properly, because if we act properly, it continues to build. And you never know what opportunities can come by that positive experience with you. And you never know what opportunities can go, because you won't know how many opportunities were lost because people actually said, you know what, I used to serve with that person. They were terrible. It was a headache. They didn't do any service. They tried to take all the credit while we did all the work, and they took all the credit. You don't know how many opportunities you'll lose because people won't even approach you with the opportunity. They were about to tell you the opportunity, then they heard, no, I heard that they were like this. And people who are mature, if they hear something negative, they won't take it at face value. But if they hear the same negative thing about you from many people, then it's like, okay, all the devotees said that this group were like that. Okay. Not, I'm going to think twice, So this is how we should be. We should understand it's our reputation on the line when we're doing these things. So thank you for your point, Rax. So your approach is good as long as it's explained to the team in the mode of goodness. Does that answer your question, Rax?
Yeah, to be fair, because even these opportunities came, I was giving everyone the opportunities to grow and develop, because there was clash of cultures when two areas emerged. Mm-hmm. But it's a conversation thing, but basically the team realized I came in, that Kshatriya nature came in, swiping dice, and yeah, so the team's happy. That's all it is. It's just bittersweet for the team, thinking, oh my god, we were going to lose a great manager. That's the kind of impression, and that's it.
But
so
that's good. If they should feel like, that's actually important. They should feel that this person, they served us so well in their leadership role that we're sorry to see them go. That's good. That's a good sign. That's leaving a legacy.
Okay, cool.
If we leave as a leader, people should never think, oh, thank God that person's no longer in charge. They should never think that's a bad sign. Any other questions or comments? Shamsunda, yes.
I just want to share one point, which I heard from the previous session as well on the recording, and then you kind of brought up Sati today, that although this is kind of focusing a lot on leadership and leading a team, but also recognizing good leaders and having capacity to be approached from good leaders also important. And something I try to reflect on is that, am I in a position where I can be approached by a good leader as well and provide that service just as much as trying to lead others?
Yeah, thank you. See, there's a lot of very powerful, like subtle learning in the Shastra. One of them is that we know this. Prabhupada says the first-class disciple becomes a first-class guru. What that also means is a principle. What it means is that the best follower is actually the best leader. You see, someone who can't follow, they can't lead, because no one is a leader by themselves. If I'm a leader, I must be a follower of my leader, right? For me to be a qualified leader, I have to have someone above me who I can follow. So I'm a leader for the juniors, and I'm a junior for my leader. Makes sense, right? Even in the Varnashram system, the Kshatriya is under the Brahmana, you see? So the Brahmanas are guiding the Kshatriyas, and the Kshatriyas are guiding the population. So the best follower is the best leader. If the person can't follow, then to be honest, it indicates that they'll have an issue with being a good leader. Yeah. So actually we should be as good at following. Basically, it's a nimitta, it's a sign. If a person can really follow nicely, that can be a sign. It's not the only qualification, so you have to look at it in context, but it can be a sign that they could also potentially, if other things are also there, be good as leaders. Yeah, but someone who can't hear from anyone, someone who's like, I can't listen to anyone, no one knows better than me, that immediately is a disqualification. Yeah, thank you. Any other question or comment? Okay, so if there's no other questions or comments, I think we will stop the session here. Thank you so much. It's always good to speak about this because it also helps me to understand more myself about this topic. And, okay, Sharadi, you have a question?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Actually, I have many questions. I have a whole list of questions, but I'll just ask one question.
Okay.
So my question was related to the point you made about the importance of being a principle-centered leader. And you gave the example that if there's a team, it's natural you might have, kind of like more, say, affection for some people because you just have a friendship. But then it means if you're principle-centered, if your friend would do something inappropriate, you would still, deal with it fairly. And, see that there's basically that justice is done. And, if they need to be corrected, they need to be corrected. So my question is, though, that sometimes we see that if you want to act that way, then the friend will turn around and say, but primarily you're my friend. And secondarily, you are the manager. And now, you wanting to, correct me or point out that I've done something wrong or not allow me, to do whatever I want. It's a sign that you're not a loyal friend. And then they say that you're impersonal, because you're following like the system or the principle, like, for instance, we cannot, I don't know, we have to be on time. And now if you say to this person, you've been late several times, we need to address this, then they might say, but you're placing the principle above, our relationship. So how do we navigate that situations that we can make someone feel that we are a loyal friend, but at the same time, just because they're a friend, we cannot just indulge, misconduct?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. Okay, there's so many things I want to say to you on this because it's a very good question. But Sharadi, I'm going to ask you to unmute. The first question I'm going to ask you is, when the person, let's say a situation like that happened, and the person said, if you were actually my friend, you're being impersonal. My first question to you is and I just want a yes or no answer. In your heart of hearts, when they say that, is that actually true? Yes or no?
No.
Yeah, that's the thing. So the first thing we have to do is just be very honest with ourselves, because people can say anything. And unfortunately, people do, right? They'll try and make you feel guilty, scapegoat. So you just have to be very honest. The person, so they were late and they're my friend, but they're part of the team and I'm meant to lead the project and I address them and they're saying that I'm being personal. Is that actually true? It's not true. It's just because they don't like the fact that I'm telling them that they were late. So that's one point. Second point that came to mind is that it becomes tricky when there's these previous relationships. So it's important when we begin a position of service where we're in charge of a group and we've had previous relationships with those people in the group, we have to begin by actually just resetting the expectation. So look, we're friends and I'm always your friend. Now I'm in a position where I'm going to have to lead. Let's just talk about this. Like, how do you feel about that? Like, what do we do if there's some situation where there's an issue, etc., etc. So you when there's no issue, you clarify the expectations up front so that the person can't then say later on, oh, but you're my friend, blah, 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 blah. Because it's like, no, remember we had this conversation and you told me that if something comes up, I should tell you like that. So that's another thing you can do. Third thing you can do is how you communicate an issue. You can adjust it according to the relationship that you have with the person, which is a principle. So someone's been your friend for many years. You may say it in a much more of a pally way, like, oh yeah, come on, John, we've been friends for years. Like, how come you were late? I'm just concerned because the other people in the group are now complaining about it or they're upset. And I don't want you to look bad. Like, what's happening? I'm sure there's a reason. Like, what happened? Oh, actually, to be honest, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, I get it. Like, so going forward, would you be able to be on time? Because I just don't want you to look bad, like that. And obviously I'm responsible for the project. We're friends, right? So I'm talking to you in that, as a friend. I don't want you to look bad. And I don't want it to be, and also because if I don't address it, I don't want people to then come around and say that, I'm playing favorites, because obviously, you've been around even longer than they have. And I know that you're usually on time. Like, I'm surprised. What happened? So there's many different ways you can do it. There's many different ways you can address it. But the point is that you do have a responsibility to address it. Now, again, going back to what we said earlier, you may just ask that person. So, what do you think is going well? What do you think you're doing well? What would you improve on, right? And then it can be like, to be honest, the other thing is a few people have expressed some concern because they said that you're turning up late. What do you think about that? Or it could be a few people have expressed some concern because they say you're turning up late. And I did notice in the last 2 programs that you turned up late. So you're not even accusing them of anything, but you see what I've done is I've just described the reality. So I said, a few people have said that have been concerned that you're turning up late. And I noticed on the last 2 programs, the program was at 12 o'clock and you came at 12:30, or the program was at 1 o'clock and you came at 1:30. What are your thoughts on that? You see? And you put them, because that's also sattvic, because you've just described what's actually going on. And no one can say you're accusing them of this or that. You've just actually given a description of what actually happened. And now it's on them to provide the narrative, there's so many ways in which you can do it. Does that help in some way, Sharadia? If you're there, Sharadia.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, yes, no, I think that's immensely useful. I think for me personally, I need to learn, because I think I'm quite strong on like, I'll be principle centered, and for me justice isn't very important, but I think I need to work on that part of still nourishing the relationship at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I think that's like, that balance is definitely important.
One other thing that I've found useful is building in at the beginning of a project, like feedback mechanisms so at the beginning of the project, everyone knows, for example, what we're going to do is every now and then we're going to ask everyone for feedback on each other, like that. So I'm going to do a round as the leader of the project, and I'll just ask everyone for feedback on everyone else, and in that way everyone knows at the beginning that, okay, this whole group are going to give feedback on me every now and then. So now I've got a natural incentive to make sure that I've got a good relationship with all of you and that I behave properly, because I know even if I think Sharadia is going to let me get away with it, but everyone's going to give feedback. So I know that even though Sharadia is my friend, she may let me get away with it, but the other people are not my friend. and they're going to point out what I'm doing wrong, you know? So therefore I'm incentivized even before I've done anything wrong to try to behave at it gives loving pressure. It gives loving pressure for me to behave as best as possible, and to know that if the manager or the leader of the project comes to me later on and gives me some feedback, it's not from her necessarily, but I know everyone's giving feedback on a regular basis. You see the point? That's the point. But we want to create such a loving trust between team members that everyone's able to give each other feedback and consider that feedback nicely. It doesn't mean you have to blindly accept it, but we want to have such a culture whereby we can say, you know what, that's a fair point. Actually, I did mess up in that way. I could have done it better. Yeah. And so when we're a leader and people give us feedback, we should always say thank you. And if you really want to understand what Krishna's trying to tell you, if you go out to the devotees and you ask them, how am I doing? What do you think I could do better? What do you think I could improve on? What do you think I'm doing well? It's so amazing. Krishna often uses the devotees to give you some real keys, some real healthy insight on how you can get more. Actually, when you get feedback from devotees, if it's useful, sometimes they may just be wrong, so don't blindly accept it. But when you get feedback from devotees and it's actually correct, what they're giving you the way by which you can get more of Krishna's mercy if you adjust according to that feedback. Okay, thank you for your question, Sharadi. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhu. I have more questions. I'm not sure if I can ask one or if I run out of time.
I've got time, but I'm also conscious of everyone else. So what I'd say is, I'm gonna say, for those of you who need to leave, feel free to leave, because we've gone over 2 hours, and you know it's a great topic. For those who want to stay, Charity I know has always good questions, and I'm happy to answer those good questions as well. So if anyone wants to stay, they can stay, and even if you have to leave, that's fine. But the more, even if you have to leave, what will happen is you can see the recording later on, so you can see what the other questions were. And I just want to check with ISKCON Redbridge. I know you need to leave. Can I end the call, or do you need to end the call?
The recording's on my computer, so it won't record if I leave.
Oh, it won't record if you leave.
Yeah.
But I've got host rights. Can I not end the call?
You can end the call, but it won't be recorded because the recording's going straight onto my computer.
Okay. In that case, what I think we should do, because I think that it's going to Redbridge need to leave as well. Sharadi, can I ask you to make a note of those questions, and then we can get into it next time? Sharadi, is that okay?
Hare Krishna, sorry, I was on mute. I didn't realize. Yes, of course, Prabhu. I'll just compile the questions.
Yeah, because otherwise we'll lose the recording. Okay, no worries. Yes. We'll continue. Maybe next session, maybe we'll begin with the questions and answers and go from there. Okay, thank you very much for your time, everyone. Thank you for a very enlivening discussion on leadership. We'll continue with the last few points and Q&A in the next session. Thank you. Take care. Haribol.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Haribol.